Hello everyone. Hope all of you are safe and healthy. Welcome to IS Baba's Rapid Revision series for Prelims 2021. This is session 27 and day 37. So the topics we have are Ancient India, Kingdoms, Art and Architecture. So these are the hot topics we are going to discuss. The Yogic sculpture, then Saint Tirugnana Sambandar, the Shaivik saint, then Sacred Ensembles of Hoysala, then Polonnarva of Sri Lanka and the Cholas, then Sangam literature, then Borfukam of Assam, then Lingaraja temple Bhuvaneshwar, then Gurjara Pratiharas, then Kushanas, and the Jainist philosophy. So friends, like the last class, we take up the timeline today as well. So we had stopped at the 0 AD or the Anno and we will continue from there. So friends, from 100 BC to 100 AD, we know that Kushans, Parthians, Shakas, they ruled India, and in South India, Shatavahanas ruled. And then in 200 AD, Guptas were established, and till 400 AD, Guptas ruled North India. And in South India, in the 300 AD and the further years, Pallavas, Kadambas and Vakatakas they ruled. And in 400 AD, Huns they started invading Guptas, and in South India, Pallavas continued their dominance. And in 500 AD, Shashankas they took over Guptas, and in South India, Pallavas they started fading away. And then in 600 AD, Harsha ruled over North India, and in South India, Badami Chalukyas, the constructors of Badami, Aihole and Patadakallu, they came to the power. And then in 700 AD, Rashtrakutas were established, and by 800 AD in North India, the Palas, Pratiharas and Rashtrakutas, they ruled all over the Ganga-Indus belt. And then in 900 AD, Chahamanas, Chandelas and other kingdoms who were the splinter groups of Palas, Pratiharas and Rashtrakutas, they ruled over North India, and in South India, the imperial Cholas or the later Cholas, they came to the forefront. And then by 1100 AD, Battle of Terrain took place between the Chahamanas and Mahmud Ghazni, and in South India, Kalyana Chalukyas, they came to prominence. And by 1300 AD, Delhi Sultanate was ruling North India, and in South India, Hoysalas, Kakatiyas of Warangal were ruling. So this is all about the timeline for today, and we will continue in the next history class. Now coming to first topic, yogic sculptures. Friends, why was it in news? Because the op-ed in the International Day of Yoga, it carried the history of yoga in India carved in the stone. So this was present in the Financial Express. If you have time, you can read it. And in this context, what are the sculptures of yogic postures that are present in Indian architecture becomes important. And the editorial provides beautiful insights over various yogic postures that are carved in Indian architecture and sculpturing. So some of the key pieces are the Harappan seals. They depict Shiva in Dhyana Yoga Mudra. So maybe Prajapati seal and other seals can be compared as Shiva doing yogic postures or Shiva in meditating posture there. And then Yoga Murti of Lakshmi Narasimha. So in Hampi of Vijayanagara dynasty, the Yoga Murti of Lakshmi Narasimha can be considered as performing the yogic postures. And then Shiva in Jnana Yoga in Kailashanath temple in Kanchipuram. So in Kanchipuram, Shiva is found to be in preaching position. So preaching, meditating, these are all the yogic postures as per the editorial. Then Arjuna's penance in Rukshasana was found in Mahabalipuram temple. So the great Arjuna's penance was found to be in Rukshasana. So what is Rukshasana, friends? It is standing on single foot with the hands folded upwards. And then chief deity of Badrinath was found in Jnana Mudra once again. So Sri Narayana, the chief deity of Badrinath, was found in preaching mode. Then Yoga Narayana Murti of Khajuraho temple. So once again, when Vishnu does the yogic positions, it is like sitting in Padmasana and preaching the devotees. So these are the yogic sculptures that are present in India, and if there are any further updates, we will update it. Then coming to next, Saint Tirugnana Sambandar. Friends, we know that in NCERTs we have learned Sambandar, Sundarar, Manikavasagar, etc. So these are the Nayanar saints. So if any of the saints, if they are in use, they automatically become important for prelims. Now, why was the saint Tirugnana Sambandar was important? Because Mukti Utsavam of Tirugnana Sambandar was celebrated in Nellur Peruman temple of Achalapuram. So in the Nellur Peruman temple of Achalapuram, a birth anniversary of Tirugnana Sambandar was held. And who was Tirugnana Sambandar? He was a Nayanar saint or the Shaivik saint of Tamil Nadu, and he lived in 7th century AD. And he was a contemporary of Appar, another Nayanar saint. So Appar, Sambandar, Sundarar, these are all Shaivik saints. And then information about Sambandar comes mainly from Periya Purana of Tirumurai. So in the next slide, we will discuss what is Tirumurai. So friends, we will discuss more about Nayanars and then take up Tirumurai. So important saints of Nayanars are Appar, Sambandar, Sundarar and Manikavasagar. So they performed the worshipping and praising of Lord Shiva. And here, apart from Nayanars, there are Siddhars and other Lingayat versions who also praise Lord Shiva. So Siddhas, Shaivas, then Lingayats are the followers of Basavanna have already appeared in prelims. So we will take care of all of them here itself. And then coming to Tirumurai. What is Tirumurai, friends? It is a 12-volume collection of all Nayanar poetry. So almost all the Nayanar poetry is collected in this one Tirumurai. So Nambiyandar Nambi, he compiled the first 7 volumes of Tirumurai and he named it as Tevaram. So first 7 verses of Tirumurai is called Tevaram and it was compiled by Nambiyandar Nambi. And then the poets like Appar, Sambandar and Sundarar, they have contributed to this Tevaram or the first 7 volumes of Tirumurai. And then Tiruvachakam by Manikavasagar, it formed the 8th and 9th version. So 8th and 9th version was contributed by Manikavasagar from his Tiruvachakam. And then 10th was the Tirumandiram by Tirumular, the famous Siddhar saint. So we spoke of Siddhar saint before, so we will take care of here itself. Then the 11th verse was compiled by Karaikal Ammayar and Cheraman Perumal and others. So the 11th one was compiled by this Karaikal Ammayar and others. And then Secular's Periya Puranam. It contained the life depiction of all the 63 Nayanars and was included as the 12th Tirumural. So the 12th Tirumural, it contained the life history of all the 63 Nayanars. So we have spoke of this Periya Puranam and also learned that most of the stories of Tirugnana Sambandar was also taken up from this Periya Puranam. And now this Periya Puranam is the last verse of Tirumurai. So this is all about Tirumurai and the Shaivik saints. Now coming to next. So friends, when we discussed Shaivik saints or the Nayanars, we will take up almost all the Bhakti movements and revise here itself. So this picture in NCERT is very much informative and it is very useful to remember all the Bhakti saints here. So we can see Guru Nanak of 15th and 16th century, Dadu Dayal, Surdas, Ramananda Kabir Raidas, Vallabhacharya Tulsidas, then Shankaradeva Chaitanya Deva, then Eknath Tukaram Basavanna, Ramadas Gnaneshwar, etc. So we will remember this figure and we will paste it in front of our study table and revise again and again. So this is all about the Bhakti saints and Shaivik movements. Coming to next. Sacred ensembles of Hoysala dynasty. So why was it in news, friends? Because Ministry of Culture, it came out with a nomination dossier for this tentative UNESCO World Heritage Site. So currently it is in the tentative list. So in order to get into the original list, the government of India should come up with a dossier and it should submit to the UNESCO. So that is why it was in news. And now coming to the key architectural features of Hoysala dynasty. So first one is the star-shaped platform. So almost all the temples were built on the star-shaped platform this way. And then no domes were present. So the domes of South India like the Vimana, Kalasha, Shikaras were absent. And in the figure we can see the temple without any dome here. So the historians predict that the domes might have fallen down. But however, the absence of dome can be stated as unique feature of Hoysala dynasty. And then the Navaranga or the place to participate in cultural programs. So around the temple there was enough space called as Navaranga so that people can assemble during the festivals. And then Garuda Stamba or the pillar of Garudas was installed in front of temples during Hoysala dynasty. And these Garuda Stambas are monolithic pillars and they were installed to commemorate the Garudas or the bodyguards of the king who laid down their lives for the protection of the king. And then Mantapa or the pillared halls of all sizes were present around the sanctum sanctorum of Hoysala temples. And then Kalyani or a stepped well was one of the unique features of Hoysala. Here the water from this stepped well was used for the worshipping of the Lord inside the temple. Then Ratabiri or the chariot streets. So wide streets were allowed in front of the temple for procession and this was used to take the god all over the city during the festivities. So these are the unique features. Then coming to more facts about Hoysala temples. The Belur Channakeshava temple was a Vishnu temple and it was located on the banks of Yagachi river. So Yagachi river flows in Hasan district of Karnataka and therein lies Belur Chanakeshwara temple. And then exterior of the temple is sculpted with Vishnu and his reincarnations. So Dashawataras are being sculpted, and the epics like Ramayana and Mahabharata are also sculpted. So we can see how the walls are being intricately carved, and this was possible only because the stones were soap stones. So soap stones, they will allow for these intricate carvings. Other stones, they will break. And then coming to Hoysaleshwara temple at Halebeedu. So it was built in 1121 CE or 1121 AD during the reign of Hoysala king Vishnuvardhana Hoysaleshwara. So one of the famous kings. And moreover friends, Halebeedu city has a walled complex containing 3 Jaina basadis. So even Jain temples were present in Hoysaleshwara dynasty. And here the Pashwanatha Basadi, Adinatha Basadi, Shantinatha Basadi were present. And out of this, Parshvanatha Basadi was the largest. And then the Kedareshwara temple or the Shiva temple was also present in Hoysaleshwara dynasty. Friends, Hoysalas were basically worshippers of Vishnu, but however, Jaina temples, Shiva temples were also encouraged in the dynasty. So this is all about Hoysala ensembles. Coming to next, Polonnaruva and Cholas. Friends, why was it in news? Because China-Sri Lanka Friendship Hospital was built in this Polonnaruva, but however, the historical significance was associated with the Cholas. So the key facts here are, in 993 AD, King Rajaraja Chola had raided this city along with Anandpur. And then the Mahavamsa, a chronicle of Sri Lanka, mentions that a Chola prince known as Ellalan, he invaded Sri Lanka in 235 BC. So both early Cholas and the medieval Cholas, they have invaded this city for various reasons, and in the map we can see how the Cholas, they reigned their control over almost all the northeast kingdoms like Panay, then Srivijaya, then Kadaram, Chahaya, etc. Friends, for us, annexations of any kingdoms are not important, but for us the administrative and architectural achievements are more important. So we will concentrate on that. Coming to early Cholas. So here Karaikala Chola stands out as a great builder, and he built a grand Anakat to the Kaveri river. So he built a dam to the Kaveri river. Then coming to later Cholas, they built several temples, and the list goes here. So as a proof of pronunciation, we will take it up. So listen again and again these friends, so that you will memorize here itself. No need of taking notes. First one, Vijayalaya Cholaveshwara temple. It was built in Narthamalai, and it was built by King Vijayalaya himself. Then Balasuramanya temple was built in Kannanur, and it was built by King Aditya I. And then Naveshwara temple was built in Kumbakonam, and it was built again by Aditya I. We will take care of these two here. And then Muvarkoil was built in Kudumbalur or Pudukottai. Pudukottai is the present name of Kudumbalur, and it was built by Bukti Vikramakesari, a feudatory of Chola. Then Koran Ganatha temple, it was built in Srinivasanallur, and it was built by Parantaka I. And then Rajaraja Chola has built several temples. We will take them up. They are Tiruvalishwaram temple at Brahmadesam. It was built by Rajaraja I. Then Uttara Kailasa temple at Tiruvadi. It was again built by Rajaraja I. Then Vaidyanatha temple at Tirumalvadi was again built by Rajaraja I. And Rajarajeshwara temple at Tanjore, the famous one, it was built by Rajaraja I, we know that. And then Gangaikonda Cholapuram temple at the Gangaikonda Cholapuram place was built by Rajendra Chola. And then Airavateshwara temple at Darasuram was built by Rajaraja Chola once again. And then Kampahareshwara temple at Tribhuvanam was built by Kulotunga III. So these are the temples constructed by the medieval Cholas or the later Cholas. Then coming to next, Sangam literature. Why was it in news, friends? Because Shilapadikaram and Paditripatu were said to have been providing insights on the classless society. So there was an editorial in Times of India. If you get time, you can read it. So these two literature works, they provided for classless society. So in this context, the whole Sangam literature will become important. And now, what is Sangam? Friends, just like how Buddhist Sanghas were held, the same way 3 Sangams were held by the Sangam saints or the Sangam poets. So first one was held in Madurai, second one in Kapadapuram, and third one in Tenmadurai. So friends, the literary works that were compiled in Madurai Sangam were lost, and only one last compilation of second Sangam in Kapadapuram is remaining, and almost all the collections of Tenmadurai Sangam are intact. Now, Sangam literature is basically divided into 2 categories, that is Patinen Mel Kanakku and Patinen Keel Kanakku, or the 18 older literatures and 18 new literatures. So these older Tamil poetry and later Tamil poetries. These are very basic classifications. And here coming to Patinen Melkanakku, here Tolkappiyam is the only surviving literature from second Sangam. So we spoke this about the second Sangam earlier. So Tolkappiyam was the only one that is surviving. And then in the third Sangam, Ettuto Goy and Pattu Pattu, these two belong to the Patinen Melkanakku, and the rest they belong to Patinen Keelkanakku or the later poetry. So what are the examples of later poetry? They are Tirukkural, Palamoli and Acharakovi. Friends, Palamoli and Acharakovi can mean comma and full stop. So if you know the meaning, you can remember better. So friends, this is the overall picture regarding the Sangam literature. So 3 Sangams will remember, Patinen Melkanakku will remember, Patinen Keelkanakku will remember, and some of the examples we will remember. Then come to next, the post Sangam literature. So that also we will revise. Friends, the difference is that in the post Sangam literature, they were not didactic. They didn't preach anything. They were just stories. So some of the examples are Shilapadikaram. It was written by Ilango Odigal. We know that this is already present in NCERT, and this is the story of Kovalan, Kannagi and Madhavi. And Manimegalai, this is the story of the child born to Kovalan and Madhavi, and it was written by Achanar. We also know that. Then Jivaka Chintamani, this means the master of all arts, and this was authored by Madurai based Jain sect Tirutakka Devar. So this is a Jaina text basically, and it was written by Tirutakka Devar. And then Valayapati, this is a story of the person called Valayapati, and it was written by Chintamani Pulavar. And then Kundalakeshi, it was written by the Nathakutanar, and it was Tamil Buddhist epic. So just like Ramayana Mahabharata, this is a Buddhist epic, and it was written by Nathakutanar. So these are some of the post Sangam literatures. So now coming to next, Borfukan. Friends, we know that during the assembly elections of Assam, political leaders, they took this name repeatedly, and that is why it becomes important. So what is Borfukan? It is not the name of a person, it is actually the name of a position. So who was he? He was a provincial administrator. So just like the Diwan in Mughals, or just like the chief minister of current administration, Borfukan was a provincial administrator. So in this context, we will study the brief structure of Assam administration of those times. Now, the structure of administration was given in Satsori Asom Burangi. So we know what is Burangi, and it is present in NCERT as well. So we need not discuss separately this one. And then coming to the administration, at the center there is king and the king's council, and king's council is called Borchora. The name of the king's council is Borchora. And then at the province, Borfukan comes to the head, and Borfukan also has a council, and it is called Dopdar Council or Dopdar. And then member of this Dopdar is called Dopdaria Fukan. So just like how Borfukan is the member of Bor, Dopdaria Fukan is a member of Dopdar. And then each Dopdaria Fukan had to collect revenue from the subjects. The subjects are pikes. So pike is also present in NCERT. We need not discuss. Then each Dopdaria Fukan had to maintain guilds of specific professionals, maybe like cobblers, butchers guild, etc. They had to be maintained. And then Pani Fukan, Dopdaria Deka Fukan, Dopdaria Niyok Fukan, and Chetia Fukans. These are some of the members of Dopdaria Fukan. Friends, overall, what is this administration? It is the State Council of Ministers headed by the Chief Minister called Borfukan. So in simple way we can understand this, and we will move to the next. Lingaraja Temple Bhuvaneshwar. Friends, why was it in news? Because it was closed for public viewership in the wake of COVID-19. Friends, almost all the temples closed, no fact in that, but however it was highlighted by various newspapers, that is why it becomes important. Now, key facts regarding Lingaraja Temple. It was built in 11th century AD and is dedicated to Lord Shiva. So this is a Shiva temple. So no difficulty in remembering, it is Lingaraja. Then by Somavamshi rulers it was built, and it was built in Kalinga architecture. So in this context, Kalinga architecture will also become important. And then the temple also contains Vishnu images. So this is a skewed feature of Lingaraja temple. So it is a Shiva temple, but it has Vishnu images. So how was it being there? It is being added by Ganga rulers. So friends, Ganga rulers, they were the devotees of Puri Jagannath temple, and Puri Jagannath temple is a Vaishnavic temple. But however, this influence, it was carried towards the Lingaraja temple, and that is why Vishnu images came to the Shiva temple. Hence, Lingaraja is a syncretization of Shaivism and Vaishnavism sects. And now coming to more about Kalinga architecture. It has a Vimana or the structure containing the sanctorum. So just like the Nagara style, Vimana would be present. And Jagamohana, something like Mandapa or the assembly hall. And then Nata Mandira or Natya Mandira or maybe festival hall, we can say that. And then Bhoga Mandapa or the dining hall. And each of these mandapas, they increased in heights to the predecessors. So Vimana was at the highest, then came Jagamohana, and then came Nata Mandira, and then came Bhoga Mandapa. So friends, Famsana, Rekaphedia, Diol, Shikaras, these are all present in NCERTs. So that is why we had to go to this depth. The temple complex has 50 other shrines and was enclosed by large compound walls. So large compound walls was one of the main features of Lingaraja temple. So this is all about Lingaraja temple. We take a view of it and we will move on. Coming to next, Gurjara Pratiharas. Friends, why was it in news? Because Natesha, a 9th century rare sandstone idol of Rajasthan temple, was smuggled out in 1998, but it was returned recently. And now coming to idol of Natesha, it was originally belonging to Ghateshwara temple of Baroli, Rajasthan. And now coming to art and architecture of Gurjara Pratiharas. So friends, Gurjara Pratiharas were the splinter groups of Gupta dynasty, we know that. And most of the administrative and architectural features, they were the cut copy paste of Guptas. But however, they added their own features, like they added mandapa to the Gupta architecture. Friends, we know that Gupta temples were bare sanctum sanctorums. They were not covered by mandapas. And these people, they built halls around those sanctum sanctorums. And then Trirathas and Pancharathas were built. So if there was one single shrine, so these people built 3 other sub-shrines around them or 5 other sub-shrines around them, so that Trirathas or Pancharathas can be established. And these people were known for open pavilion temples. So no closed compound enclosure was present. So here we can see Somnatha temple, no compound walls are present here. So it is a open pavilion temple. And then some of the example of Gurjara Pratihara temples are Gadarmal temple and Bado Pathari temple. So Bado Pathari and Gadarmal temple are the 2 famous temples built by Gurjara Pratiharas. Now coming to administration, friends, once again it was an emulation of Gupta dynasty, and the kingdom was divided into Bhuktis, and Bhuktis were divided into Uparikas, and Vishayapati headed each Bhukti. And then as a matter of fact, Sulaiman and Al-Masudi, these 2 merchants, they visited the kingdom, and then Rajashekara, the famous poet of Mahendrapala, will become important, and his works like Karpura Manjari and Kavya Mimamsa will also be taken care of here. So this is all about Gurjara Pratiharas. Coming to next, Kushanas. Friends, why was in news? Because Pakistan was urging for the 8th wonder status for Kanishka Stupa. So Kanishka Stupa was built during Kushans. And now more about Stupa. It was established by Kushana king Kanishka during the 2nd century AD, and it is in Peshawar. And now coming to more about Kushans. Friends, Kushans were famous for coinage. And Vima Kadphises, the second ruler of Kushans, we know the first ruler of Kushan was Kujalo Kadphises. And Vima Kadphises, he introduced first gold coins in the history of India. And then Kanishka too, he issued gold coins named dinars. And then coins of Samudragupta were very similar to that of Kushans. So here in this figure, we can see that these coins were introduced by Vasudeva II of Kushan dynasty, and these were introduced by Samudragupta. Look at the sculpture, the same is being emulated. So this is how Samudragupta's coinage were very similar to the Kushan coinage. So that is how they were famous. Come to next, Kushana art. Friends, though we know that Kushanas were the proponents of Gandhara art, there were some Mathura arts as well performed by them. And some of the examples of the art were headless torso of Kanishka, it was in Mathura style, and standing idol of Havishka, it was in Gandhara style. Then statue of Vima Kadphises, it was once again in Mathura style, and Loria Tangai's standing Buddha statue, it was in Gandhara style. So we will take a look at these statues and we will understand how both the schools of art were practiced by Kushans. So this first one, the Vima Kadphises sitting statue, it is the example of Mathura art, and also the headless torso once again belongs to Mathura art. But however, when we see the draperies of these two, we will get to know that these two, the Loria Tangai's Buddha and the Havishka's image, they were built in Gandhara art. So both the arts were flourished by Kushanas. So this is all about Kushanas. Coming to next, Jainism. Friends, Jainism was in news because a book was released recently named 100 Years of Jainism in Nagaland, a journey from 1885 to 1985. So, how Jainism flourished in Nagaland was all about the book. And then, moreover, Kohima Jain Temple completed 100 years in 2020, and Jainism as a whole has completed 135 years in Nagaland. So, in this context, Jainism in Nagaland will become important. So, friends, in 1880s, a Sethi family or the Sethi family, they migrated to Nagaland and they settled and they propagated Jainism there. And they built two important temples, that is the Kohima Jain Temple and Dimapur Temple. So, these two temples will become important. We will note down here itself and move on. Friends, as I spoke in the early classes, that is, A.L. Basham's The Wonder That Was India provides a great resource for Jainism and Buddhism. I hope you have read A.L. Basham by now, and now coming to the Jain philosophy, I have picked some of the essence from A.L. Basham book so that if they are difficult for you to understand, let me make you understand. So, what is the basic philosophy of Jainism? It says that universe is eternal and is divided into Utsarpini and Avsarpini. So, what is Utsarpini and Avsarpini, friends? These are progressive time and regressive time. So, universe is made of good time as well as bad time, something similar to yin and yang of Chinese philosophy. And then each cycle contains 24 Tirthankaras, 12 universal emperors called Chakravartins, and 63 great men called Shataka Purushas taking birth in each cycle. So, in each cycle, all these people will take birth in order to reform the society. And moreover, as per Jainism, universe is an interaction of Jiva and Ajiva. So, it is an interaction between living and non-living beings. And Jainism classifies the Ajivas or the non-living beings into 5 kinds. They are Akasha, the sky, Pudgala, the matter, then Kala, the time, then Dharma and Adharma. So, our interaction with these non-living beings will decide our future. So, if we interact more with Dharma, we will get a good future, and if we interact more with Adharma, we will get a bad future. And then Jainism says that annihilation of karma or nirjara comes through continuous penance. So, if you meditate continuously, you can get rid of your karma. And moreover, if you practice the prevention of asrava and bandha, you will get nirvana once again. So, what is asrava, friends? Asrava is non-secretion of hormones. So, why you don't secrete hormones? Only when you are in control of your senses. So, when you control your senses with utmost stringency and when you are detached of family, you will automatically get rid of karma. So, Jainism says that samvara or the complete killing of asrava and bandha should be taken up for getting rid of karma. So, this is all about Jainist philosophy. Then coming to last. Friends, we know that history is a difficult subject and it is very challenging for everyone to remember the facts. But only those people who revise continuously, who read repetitively, only they will succeed. So, before giving up reading history or before backing down from revising history, remember that one great quote, that is, winners never quit and quitters never win. So, never ever quit any subject for that matter from studying. All the very best, friends. Good luck. Thank you.